And I have a great pleasure to invite our first speaker, member of the European Parliament, Professor Vytautas Landsbergis. It will be too difficult to mention all his titles, but what I would like to mention or remind you is that Professor Landsbergis was the leader of the reform movement Sąjūdis that led us to our liberation. He was the chairman of the Lithuanian Reconstituent Seimas, the Supreme Council. He was the head of the state at the time that was most difficult for Lithuania. And what I would like to add is that now working at the European Parliament, Mr. Landsbergis contributes a lot together with his colleagues from other European countries to preserve the memory, and so that we'll have more memory and more conscience in Europe in general. The floor is yours.
You may speak from your place of sitting, or else you could use the place. Good morning. Welcome to the conference, ladies and gentlemen. I was preparing for a welcome address, not for a full-length presentation. But let me make a few words on the subject issue of our first session, even though the theme is important for the entire conference as well. The name of the opening session is European Memory and Conscience. In order to save time and paper, I will start with terminology. The European conscience, or Euro conscience, is a brief way to say European conscience. If we say European conscience, we would start deliberations on what are the cultural limits of Europe, what is the Europe we're talking about, and what are the extents of Europe we're talking about, from Chernobyl to the Ural Mountains. Is there any officially recognized conscience that exists in that area? There are no courts in some parts, whereas in Europe there are ones. Euro conscience is a formula that should be associated with a democratic developing Europe, which should be given content by completing it, according to Robert Schuman. New concepts are quite interesting, such as Euro children, Euro kids. Some suggest talking about the memory of Europe, which would leverage the Euro amnesia, or the loss of memory in Europe. This is more easy to understand, and the politicians and historians who took over the mission to counter the Euro amnesia at least know what they're doing. I think I belong to them. I have some colleagues around who are also countering Euro amnesia. Euro conscience is something more difficult to tackle. In the official Russia, it doesn't exist as a phenomenon. As a result, we may draw the conclusion that the official Russia is outside the scope of Europe with conscience. It's another civilization. And this is a threat for a civilizational war. We should not allow this happening. This is why we will soon see the proposed single solution, which is now unofficially promoted. They're promoting the concept where Europe doesn't have a conscience. Nobody's feeling bad because of that, one may think. Unfortunately, these phenomena, these trends, are trends in progress in Europe. Even the great financial economic crisis, the credit crunch, is a crunch of consciousness, is the crisis of consciousness. Conscience was at stake, and this is why the financial systems collapsed. Banks were acting against the conscience. At a conference on business ethics in Brussels, I've made a speech on the paradox. You can see the plaques with inscriptions and inscriptions on rooms which say fitness room in Western Europe. It's the place where you can physically improve, but there are no inscriptions saying fairness room. This is a paradox, and we have it, we live with it. There's a huge gap that separates fairness from legality. Fairness is value judgment, and legality is based on the agreements between lawyers, where we tend to focus on the fact that in jurisprudence, the one who is not caught is not guilty, and there are no issues of fairness. This is why the credit crunch happened. People say we need to adhere to the legislation, but not European legislation. Even European legislation is not adhered to. There was a stability pact. Maybe it still exists, but people suggest drawing up a new one. The Stability Pact signed by the EU member states had set the limits to loans and the limits to state budget deficit. Even so, the two largest countries did not adhere to this Stability Pact. They did what they found more useful to do. And other countries were not in the know of why the common criteria were not used. A hence war between Lithuania and its neighbors, and the directive between the directive of the EU on the practice of keeping hens in conditions. Lithuania adheres to the regulations, whereas its neighbors don't, and then the neighbors will compete better in the market, and they will win over Lithuania. So in practice, unfair dealings lead to more wealth and win over the fair ones. And there are many issues like that. There's no fairness. We can see that from the trial cases into the issues of political opponents and the lack of cases against the greatest liars. So this should serve as a reminder to you about the fact that the life is not better on the other side. The grass is not greener on the other side, and we are on the other side. A forum would be important if you could use it to defend the principles and fairness. This forum would be the press. But let's read what the Lietuvos Žinios daily writes about the moral catastrophe of the Lietuvos Rytas daily. We are not dealing with the last threat to business interests and unfair business interests. This media outlet is part of the unfair business, and it's ready to attack others from the cornerstone of its interest. These are the general trends. Unfortunately, they can be observed both in Europe and in Lithuania. The trends are sad. Someone could even write a book on them, with many chapters on the political discourse and actions. If we systemize this information, a PhD thesis could be written, and this might be useful. The subject for the thesis would be your conscience as the disappearing kind of motivation. Fairness-based motivation? What's that? This is what should motivate our action, fairness. But it doesn't. We lack it. If there is anyone willing to write this book, I will not protest, and I will not ask for a patent for the idea. For a long while, I also proposed that Europe, if it has the will to survive, needs to set a new place for the human being and a new philosophy of life. The old plagues of anger have to be thrown away. We should remember the key plague which had on it the 10 commandments. They should also be complemented with the commandments from St. John and St. Paul on fairness, truth, freedom, and love. I don't propose to engage in the free love. We're brothers and sisters. This is the love, the kind of love I have in mind. In the context of this day and this conference, let us understand the consciousness impacted by occupation. It demonstrates that occupation is still going on. It continues. Love and sympathy, empathy are the key foes of communism of conscience. These are the arms against mental occupation, but we should adhere to these values. Tonight, the television of Lithuania will finally demonstrate the work by Latvian Snorre, who will describe the Soviet story. It's a movie. It's the most impressive work to date on the memory and conscience of nations. Mental memory prevents the conscience from being destroyed. Therefore, I suggest that the conference members make an open address against the partisans of the dying of values. Let us not agree with those who suggest forgetting our parents and throwing away the matrix of our memory. The people say, let's go forward, let's forget our past, let's forget who we are. No, this is not the good way. Euro amnesia should be stopped. Euro conscience should be supported so that it doesn't finally die. The brainless Europe will not subsist. Let us take the position for survival. Thank you.